Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Oleksandr, and it's my pleasure to see all of you here in Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform. Today is day 527 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about the situation on the water and around. Joining us in this studio is Oleksandr Khorunzhiy, press officer of the State Emergency Service. Good afternoon, Mr. Oleksandr. Good afternoon, glory to Ukraine. Good afternoon, glory to the heroes. Mr. Oleksandr, what's the situation? We realize is the last month of summer, but at the same time we can talk about the typical problems on the water. What is the behavior of the people? Do they take it with understanding? I mean, the restrictions existing today, or do you document any violations? Well, first of all, we document the growth of the deaths on water comparing to the last year. It has increased at least 20%. For the time being, we've documented 640 people who died, including 60 children. It's about 20-23% more than last year. People neglect the elementary safety rules of on the water. They bathe where it's restricted, and they pose themselves into danger. I'll give you a couple of examples. In Chernihiv and Odessa regions, for example, in Chernihiv region, on the 7th of June, we got information about two girls born 2008 went to Desnar riverbank for recreation and have never came back. 35 personnel, including 14 divers, were involved in the operation, and they found the bodies of the girls who drowned in that river, in that beach. So the investigation is still underway, but the preliminary conclusion is they have drowned due to improper behavior on the water. In the same situation in Odessa region, a man has taken a dive and disappeared under the water surface. We got a call. We've searched the shoreline. The divers found the body on the riverbed in Ismail in Odessa region. Then two adolescents started drowning, and one of them was rescued. Well, it just happened so that a driver of one of the firefighting units has taken a dive to pull one of the adolescents from under the water, and another one has never surfaced, and only our divers pulled up his body later on. In the beach of Arcadia in Odessa, a search section of divers were searching for an adolescent born 2007 who was staying in the seashore during the storm and was washed down to the sea by an intense wave. People neglect sometimes the storm warnings. Our rescue team searched about 2,500 square meters of equator. The body of an adolescent was never found, and the works are still underway. So those are the cases when people neglect the basic safety rules. They don't explain to their children how to act on the water and around, and such behavior may cost lives. So what do you relate such cases to? Maybe we started talking less to our children about how to behave on the water and around during the war. No, we explain a lot of things to the people. It may be related, to the weather conditions, and sometimes people get used to the dangerous situations. People get used to the air raid alert signals. They don't properly react to the threats, and I think that it's a mental component that gets activated here. And in accordance to the orders and decrees of the local government in Zaporizhia, Kherson and Mykolaiv regions, the bathing season was not started. But look at the beaches in Odessa. People go out there regardless the warnings of the rescue services and the national police officers, and they continue bathing. Why is it dangerous there? Because there's another component added there, the component of mine safety related to the detonation of Kakhovka Dam, for example. And yet another thing is the sea mines that can be washed ashore, which may pose a threat as well. I mean, the threat of the explosive devices generally all across Ukraine. We have 265 places equipped for bathing near the water reservoirs, including the beaches. I will tell you just in brief where do we advise to spend time on water. So such beaches should be equipped with the rescue posts so that necessary support and help can be provided in a timely manner. Also, the water samples should have been tested by certain agencies. Those beaches should have no differences of heights or depth as people enter the waters. So there is a set of requirements for the beaches where people may stay under the supervision of the rescuers. But the situation is such that obviously we cannot equip all of the beaches all around the country with the rescue posts. There are some ponds and lakes in the villages. People based there, people have constitutional right, constitutional freedom to spend time there, but we just try to explain it to them. Don't bathe where you don't know what the bottom looks like. So try to avoid the underwater currents, the drastic difference of depth and something like that. In this case, I want to urge the people to adhere to the basic advice. Don't swim closer to the small vessels. Don't swim across the buoy line. Don't climb up on the buoys. Don't use the rescue means for other uses than rescue. Don't dive in the places where the bottom, river bottoms or sea bottom is unknown, where the depth is unknown. Don't use alcoholic beverages while recreating on the water, because people lose the sense of danger and it plays an evil joke on them then. People unfortunately just drown. Don't organize the games related to diving and capturing of those diving. You know, sometimes children play such games, sometimes even the adults, and it may result in some dangerous situations. Don't make false alert signals, like you may see such people who cry for help as if they're drowning, so people may not take those signals serious. After all, also don't post children in danger. There is a huge statistics about the drowned children. We've launched a campaign with UNICEF. We continue reiterating this, but the factor of leaving children without supervision is playing a significant role, which results unfortunately in sorrow for the families. Don't use, or we don't recommend to use the rafts or tire cameras, so we don't, you know, specifically where it's windy, because you can be driven away from the shore. Also, don't use any vehicles without specific fences around the shores. So those are the main advice we want to focus everybody's attention, and we would like to urge everybody to adhere to that advice. Mr. Oleksandr, regarding the mine safety on the water, we've seen cases even in Turkey when the mines are washed ashore over there. So since the moment of the terroristic act in the Kakhovka Dam, do we have such cases increasing? Do you have any statistics of such dangerous finds in our shores? Well, such cases are not so numerous, but they happen, and in cases when you see some unidentified or suspicious object, well, you remember the case a person has found something on the riverbank. They thought it's a gas bottle or something like that and decided to take it home, but it turned out to be a river mine. So should such cases occur, don't touch it, call 101. Unfortunately, we know such cases when people get detonated on those explosive devices. There are numerous cases like that. I would say they are relatively numerous. So, but they happen, so please exercise extreme caution. And I want to emphasize again, the bathing season was not opened in Odessa region, for example. Yet another challenge that may be posed by high temperature is fire in forests. What is the situation with fires in this regard? Well, we have an extraordinary level of fire threat in a number of regions, which means that in the forests, in the fields, any spark, any scintilla, any cigarette butt may result in a large-scale fire. We see those fires occurring in European countries. For example, in Greece there was a large-scale fire and no one knows what was the source of that fire. But look, even the glass bottle which ends up under direct sunlight may work as a lens. It may result in ignition of dry grass or other combustible materials. Well, it depends on the high temperature and dry weather. They assist to the eruption of fire on the small areas, and in case of windy weather the consequences may be catastrophic. And I emphasize, it results in death of both flora and fauna, and our rescuers from the sites of putting out of such fires, and they mostly occur in the southern regions of our country, in Mykolaiv, Odessa region, Kherson region, Zaporizhia. So our rescuers, they send us the pictures of dead hedgehogs, nestling birds, all those animals, I don't know, the hares. They unfortunately fire as a result of ignition and smoke. I'll give you short statistics. The number of fires since the beginning of the year is 11,000, and the area of such fires in ecosystems is more than 9,000 hectares. Just within last day we had to engage 242 personnel and 60 units of material to put out the fire within the last day, and it's not the highest indicator. The most of the personnel is engaged during the weekends. So I want to emphasize again the basic fire safety rules. First of all, please don't burn out the dry grass. You know this situation when people say that as you burn the dry grass it increases the fertility of the land. That's not true. That has already been proven, but people unfortunately still keep on doing this. We document such cases of burning, and people cannot control the spreading of fire, which may in its turn result in large-scale fire. At the highest level of fire safety, people are prohibited from visiting the forest. People have to understand it, because even if a vehicle enters a forest, it may produce a spark, its engine may produce a spark, or its exhaust system may produce a spark, which may result in ignition of dry grass, and then the fire may be caught by the trees, and the fire is spreading extremely quickly, specifically in the fir forests. Thank you very much. I cannot help but asking about the latest works of the rescue services related to the massive strikes that aggressor country continues to inflict upon us. The latest days were mostly difficult for Odessa, Kherson, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk regions. What is the situation over there? What was done? What are the consequences of what's going on with the missile strikes and artillery shellings? Well, I think this week we will count including the weekend, I mean the number of shellings and strikes, but I have to say the last week was very difficult for our rescuers. We've documented about 500 shellings by the enemy. You're absolutely right that the situation is the most complicated in Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, Kherson regions, just like always Kherson region, Sumy region. The enemy uses artillery fire and UAVs in intense manner. Kharkiv region is under constant shelling, so the rescuers are in jeopardy too. There was a case when the rescuers were putting out the fire in the city of Kherson. The fire erupted in the Svato-Katerinsky Cathedral, and the rescuers, those who are the first responders to put out the fire and mitigate the consequences, to clear out debris, they rescue people. Again, there was yet another shelling, and 7 people were injured, including 4 rescuers plus 2 vehicles of state emergency service were damaged. Well, you know, since the beginning of the war, the enemy continues shelling rescue units. They neglect any conventions, Geneva Convention, because in fact the rescuers are those who are protected by those conventions, but Russians, you know, they don't really care about those conventions. They continue doing their dirty business. We don't have weapons. We don't carry weapons, we have nothing to respond with. We continue our work because this situation requires work like this from us. This is our obligation, our duty to rescue people and to put out fires. So, based on what we see, this is the natural tactics of the Russians to inflict repeated strikes with understanding that the rescue teams are about to arrive along with other first responders to clear the debris and to put out the fires. So what are the means that you and measures that you use to save the people? Well, I don't really understand it when the firefighters are being shelled. Firefighting units, you know, people call them heroes without weapons. But yet another thing is a fire in a cathedral. What kind of military threat may it pose? Why do they shell the cathedral? Why do they strike the cathedrals? We asked this question ourselves multiple times, and we still cannot find any answer to that. You know, it's a difficult situation when we lose people, when we even have injured. How do we protect them? Obviously, in every region we have people using the personal protective equipment. We've replaced our firefighting helmets with the military helmets, with the armor helmets. We carry personal body armor with high level of protection, but they cannot provide a 100% guarantee, 100% protection against mortar bombs or artillery shells. Our pyrotechnics work using heavy suits where they can work. They have specialized vehicles, and there are certain methods that we use for working during air raid alerts and during other threats. But it doesn't always happen so specifically where there is direct artillery fire. It doesn't always happen so that we know where the projectile, enemy projectile would be incoming or not. When we have to put out the fire or rescue people just now, so it doesn't spread across any residential areas. So we take all the necessary efforts to save our personnel, but there are duties we have to fulfill. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for joining our broadcast. We wish those injured to recuperate as soon as possible, and we continue working together for our victory. We want to thank our armed forces and all of our security and defense forces for this opportunity to hold events like this. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you.